Morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome to today's webinar about smartphones. My name is Magnus Hasbo, and I'm with TCO Development. We are the organization behind the TCO Certified Sustainability Certification of IT products. Today, we're talking about conflict and violence when smartphones are manufactured. Smartphones and other electronic devices contain rare minerals, which are the source of many problems. 2.5 billion people are smartphone users today, and the number is an important problem. This is today's agenda. I will start with a brief introduction of our certification for those of you who are new to our organization. Then I will hand over to Joachim Wohlfeil, who is policy advisor from Diakonia. He will talk about the problems surrounding excavation of minerals used in production. After that, it's time for my colleague, Stephen Fuller, who will give our view on solutions, initiatives, and legislation. Then we will take questions. And you also have the opportunity to enter questions in the GoToWebinar client when you listen to the presentations. Finally, I will come back and say a few words about how purchasers can use our certification as a tool. A quick overview of TCO Certified for those of you who are new to us. Our vision is sustainable life cycle for IT products, and that's what we strive for. TCO Certified is the world's leading and most comprehensive sustainability certification for IT products. It helps you make responsible product choices that drive the industry in sustainable direction. TCO Certified is available in 8 product categories, and you can find a complete listing of certified products in our product finder, which is available on our webpage, tcocertified.com. This autumn, we will launch a new generation of certification criteria, and this is something we do every 3 years. A cornerstone of TCO Certified is our independent verification of compliance. This happens not only at product level, but also in factories and with brand initiatives. Independent and accredited partners verify that factories and products comply with all criteria in TCO Certified. Verification is done both before and after the certification process, covering the entire validity period. The process also includes ensuring that corrective actions are implemented in all cases of factory non-conformities. Our system of verification is based on the principles of ISO 14024 and ISO 17025. Verification is an important aspect of what we're doing, as getting to close problems is what's so important, not just setting up the criteria up front. And by that, I will now hand over to Joachim Wohlfeil, who will talk about the problems from the mines through the supply chains.
Good morning, everybody. As Magnus said, my name is Joachim Wohlfeil, and I work as a policy officer on the Swedish development organization Diakonia. My specialty there is to work with the analysis of armed conflicts and root causes to armed conflicts, and also how to do development in this kind of situations and environment. I actually have a background also in the telecom and the IT business, and has worked for several export companies. This is, of course, an interesting situation that I'm coming back to the IT and telecom business after having switched to work with human rights and armed conflict. But today I have worked with conflict minerals for nearly 10 years. It started up with doing field studies. I've been active in the creation of the new EU law, and I'm also a member today of the board of the new EU support body for the new legislation. It's called the European Partnership for Responsible Minerals. Okay, let's go to the first question there. Speaking about conflict minerals, I've tried to highlight some of the connections to human rights violations and also to armed conflict, and also speak a little bit about how the situation for the people in why are we really trying to regulate the trade with conflict minerals, and what are really the stakeholders there, but also to give a view of a little bit of the way how the minerals actually find their way all the way from the mines into our electronic products. We are speaking about mobile phones now, but it's worthwhile to mention that, of course, those are development critical materials that are strategic in basically all kind of electronic products that we use today, as well as cars, refrigerators, etc. Okay, it is actually said that nearly 40% of the domestic wars that takes place today are related to natural resources in one or another way, which gives a kind of idea about how serious this problem is. It's conflict minerals is of course one part of this, but when we're speaking about the phenomena in general, I used to describe it in another way. I don't start with the minerals. I start with the situation, and that is basically when you have very valuable natural resources in an area where you have a weak or even a non-existent state actor. This is an extremely dangerous situation. You can see in the pictures that some other areas that we know about actually that is with oil, and it's a very clear example. For example, what is happening with the ISIL or the Daesh, the militant movement in the Middle East, where actually financial factors was a very underreported part of their success and reasons for the war. Also, diamonds has been a classical example. Many of you might have seen the classical movie Blood Diamonds, that is describing the start of what was later called the Kimberley process, that is a regulation to stop the trade with blood diamonds. And if you have seen the movie, I could actually say that most of the components that you will see in that movie is actually very present also in the areas where or in the trade with conflict minerals. What happens is that you would have actors, normally armed actors, that take control over an area with those valuable resources. This is extremely profitable. They can make their living there. This might start up as a way to finance warfare, and then of course the app the way to they trade is of course not using formal ways of doing trading. So those armed groups that has control of the natural resources are in many ways trying to oppose any kind of peace process, the development of a civil society, the development of a normal government, because what they fear more than ever is actually peace, because with peace there will come laws, there will come somebody who asks, do you really have the right to do mining in the places where you're active? Have you paid your taxes? Have you paid your customs? And this would, of course, make the illegal trade with those minerals impossible. So it's not only that there is this presence of natural resources and then the combination of armed groups are contributing to, I should say, a terror against the civilian populations in the areas where they are active. It's also a mechanism that very efficiently are preventing a peaceful development, as it will be so strongly incorporated in the agenda of those actors that make the profits from this illegal trade. Um, that they are so depending on that the conflict and the lack of law will continue. When we speak about conflict minerals today, we're actually just talking about the 4 defined conflict minerals that is also called in a popular language with an abbreviation 3TG. That stands for the 3T, which is tin, tungsten, tantalum. Tantalum is also sometimes named as coltan, and then gold. The reason that those are the four minerals that has been regulated are not that they are today the most problematic, but when the discussion about conflict minerals started around 2008, 2009, 2010, those were the four minerals that were most closely connected to the war in Central Africa. I would actually say that there is a number of other minerals that are as well today contributing to conflict and to grave human rights violations. That would be like cobalt, for example, mica, copper to some extent, uranium is a very problematic substance as well. But as we are talking about a political process to try to regulate those minerals, and the political processes often takes time. It has not been possible to actually include the other minerals there. I will mention a little bit later on about the legal struggle actually to try to widen the mechanisms controlling conflict minerals, but it's still so that we are from a legal perspective we are actually talking about four minerals in rod. Okay, so what is the connection between armed violence and the minerals, as I spoke about? As I said, you will have armed groups that take control over these valuable resources. I have actually added here a picture that I've taken myself a few years ago, and it has been quite widely spread and in different news media on global basis. The reason is that it's taken in a very problematic area. It's in the border zone between northeast Congo DRC, South Sudan, and northwest Uganda. And this is an area in general where you have all the parameters. You have a lot of gold mining there. You have a weak government control, and you have a number of armed groups who has been historically controlling the area and to some extent acting as an intermediate taking governmental control, to some extent exercising authority. The reason this picture is interesting is that there is a little bit more than what you see is, of course, this is an open mining pit for gold, and you see a soldier in a uniform. This is actually the uniform of the Congolese army. However, the soldier doesn't belong to the Congolese army. He belongs to a guerrilla group that is known for very grave violence and atrocities in this area. And the interesting combination that he's standing in a mining pit where he should absolutely not be, and he's standing there in the government uniform gives an indication that there is some kind of corruption going on, that he can actually use this uniform, and that normally the normality should be, of course, that you don't have a military control over the mines, but instead it's they raid this area very regularly. What was also interesting in this area and other areas where I have been working with field studies is that prices the illegal traders actually can offer quite high prices, especially if you're talking about gold. Prices that sometimes would be in the vicinity of what can be found on the street in Western countries, which of course would not make sense when you say that this is a cheap way of achieving minerals. But it's actually so that there is also connections to some of the trade with especially gold that can be valuable directly from the mine. That there is there is criminal networks that are actually doing money laundering, and for them it can actually be it's not a problem if they actually overpay a little bit to get the black money into something that can then be sold into the normal economy. When I spoke about gold, I said, that gold is valuable straight from the mines. There is actually a slight difference that can be interesting to know about the four minerals. Tin, tantalum, and tungsten are, of course, valuable conflict minerals, but they still need a refining process to be valuable for industry. So it's not so that you basically can take them straight from the mine to products. They actually need to get into the industry. While gold can be purified in a way that you can actually have a nugget of gold after the processing that is done manually in the mine, which of course makes it easy to sell for the miners or for those controlling the area, but it also makes it very problematic, as it's like I said, it's valuable right after the basic processing. One of the things that you need to speak about when you speak about conflict minerals is actually the people that are living in the mines and that are depending on the conflict mineral trade, and that is what is called artisan mining. Sometimes it can be called small scale mining, but basically this means uh, not very organized persons working in the mines. They do it normally manually. They're not connected to large companies, but this is a major trade. As you can see in the slide, that there's more than 100 million people active globally in artisan mining, and that is a stunning figure, actually, as if you would look at the industrial mining. That is a really big industry internationally. You have 7 million, might be a little bit conservative, but maybe 7 to 9 billion people working in industrial mining. So artisan mining is 100 million people working with an artisan mining. It's a huge number. This might, of course, or this does, of course, include people that occasionally or seasonally work in the mining or in the mines, but it's still a lot of people. And it takes place in 80 countries worldwide. And as you can see on the figures, like about 20% of the gold internationally is excavated by this artisan mine. And as a figure to compare with, still about 10-20% of the world production of diamonds is also coming from artisan mining. If we speak about Congo Kinshasa, that is like the country where that has been like the epicentrum of the conflict mineral debate. 80 to 90% of the production is done by artisan miners, and as you can see there, there is a large difference in the figures. Is not very exact. A half million to 2 million people. This is actually picturing this seasonal work, and that you combine it. But what is really interesting is also that it's not only the people living straight in the mines that are depending on this. It's also their families. It's people being involved in other ways in the trade, and this basically brings us back to one of the major problems here. The artisan mining is a problem for uh, the conditions for the workers in the mine, its exposure to for armed actors. And you could of course say that, well, why don't we just stop it and don't trade with these areas at all, where we have the conflict situations, um, and only trade industrial minerals. The problem would, of course, be that this is like a two-edged sword. The artisan mining is a problematic business, definitely, but it's also keeping a lot of people alive. So this is why both international institutions and also lawmakers and also NGOs, and to some extent also mining companies, are trying to find ways to improve the situation for artisan miners, so this trade will not stop abruptly in a way to create a humanitarian disaster. But it's still a business that is very dangerous and very problematic. Next one. Let me give you a few examples of what we're talking about. Those are a few pictures taken from different mines. That is actually both from tin mines, it's from gold mines, and from tantalum mines. This is as this trade is not regulated, it also has very severe environmental implications, as you often use poisonous substances when you, for example, are excavating gold. You are often working with mercury as the chemical system substance to do the final cleaning act of the first manually cleaned gold. The person on the picture to the right, standing in the, how should we say, orange or yellow water, just to give a personal testimony. His name is Jean-Pierre, and I met him in a gold mine in northeastern DRC. And at this mine, where they are actually working in teams, he's doing the final cleaning of the gold, mixing it with mercury. And as you can see, he's standing in this water. It's highly poisonous. He's using the mercury with his bare hand. He has rubber boots that protects his feet a little bit, but then he's using his bare hands to handle the chemicals. And I asked him a little bit about himself, and he said that he thinks he's about 25 years old when this picture was taken. He was not totally sure. He had been in the mine for 5 years, and I asked him, don't you know that this is very dangerous, what you're doing? And was kind of scary when he answered that, when he actually said that, Joachim, I know I'm going to die here in my pit, probably in this place sooner or later. But I need to collect money for my family to get out of this hell, so they can start a new life somewhere. And it's a kind of depressing and shocking picture that if you're 25 years old in most of our industrialized countries, you're planning for the future, but in the conflict mineral pits, you're actually planning for your passing away, and you're thinking about your relatives. Those are it's a very grim pictures, and when you speak with the miners, they picture a situation where diseases are very they take a large toll of the workers, and since the mines are often located in remote areas, it can be really hard to get health care. You also have the violence, which I mentioned earlier, the soldiers who are basically blackmailing the miners if they are not already controlling the area. And when you discuss with them about the soldiers coming there and taking the minerals, they will probably say that, well, if they are in a good mood, they will just take the minerals we have harvested for the day. If they are in a bad mood, they will actually take our food as well. And if you would ask them if they can't call the police, that would be like a big joke, and they will normally in many cases say that, well, actually we don't want the police to come here and take what the soldiers didn't take. So it's a very, very grim reality, and it's worthwhile to think about that. Our actually low price minerals is paid by other people who pays a quite high price somewhere else. Okay, but as I said, there are many activities going on trying to improve the situation. Also, I will mention a few of the laws, but also a little bit how this is. There is how this is done. There is an initiative to green label mines. This is a very, very simple procedure, but basically you are controlling the mines if they are free from military control, if the people that are harvesting or doing excavations are the same that has the right to do the excavation. It's actually so that artisan miners also can get the right to do excavation. You will see if they pay their pay their taxes and customs, and also if there is a basic protection for the workers. This is very a simple description. If those conditions are fulfilled, you will have inspectors that are checking the mine, and then they will start up a line or a distribution line, that is a system called bagging and tagging, where mineral from so-called green mines, and you can see then in the picture that how those are packed in bags that are then given a tag by this inspector. Those bags are then taken to a distribution center where they can be bought by certified traders, and they will add another tag on these bags, and those tags are then supposed to follow the bags all the way to the smelters, and there we are actually entering the process that many of you that work with electronics will see, where these traceable bags can be taken into the production. Of course, one of the natural questions that you get when you have seen these processes and when you have met the traders and the inspectors, that aren't there a lot of cheating going on in this process? And they will say, of course, there is a number of problematic loopholes. It's easy to blackmail the inspectors, but it's still so that if we have a mechanism, we have a threshold where we can inspect, where we can ask questions, where people that see that rules are broken within the line can actually take action. And even when we speak with the miners, they are very clear that this is a positive procedure that is really needed. And this is the basis also for some of the mechanism that we have today. What we also will have is mining companies trying to do to contribute to a positive development. So, for example, if they have a mining concession, where as those land concessions are quite big, there will has historically been a lot of conflicts between companies and artisan miners. There are companies today that are actually trying very constructive ways to avoid conflict with the miners, and instead telling exactly where they are going to do excavation, and then they will tell the miners to try to organize themselves, preferably in cooperatives, so they can negotiate with the company, and then they will make an agreement and say that dedicate special places where actually the cooperatives can be active. And once the miners have got organized, it is also easier to help them to get better prices, to develop the trade, to actually have some to speak about working rights, and also to try to work with to provide protective equipment, and basically try to improve the license trade. It's still a hard and trade, but this is a way that has actually been it brings some better life conditions for the miners. So the reason that some of the mining companies, and also that we have this bagging and tagging system, is that we have a number of laws that are relevant for us. In 2010, the Dodd-Frank Act 1502 was taken in the United States, trying to regulate the trade with conflict minerals. The Dodd-Frank was positive as it showed that it was possible to do something. However, it also was a great inspiration for trying to start up this kind of green labeling of mines and bagging and tagging system. However, the Dodd-Frank Act had a number of drawbacks, I would say. First, that it came without any supportive functions for the companies that were affected. So it was really, really hard to implement, and we say the low success factor for companies actually to try to implement the Dodd-Frank Act is largely coming from the lack of routines how to do this. It was also so that the Dodd-Frank Act only concerned what was called DRC, that means Congo-Kinshasa related minerals, which was of course a problem, as the miners in Congo would say, well, that was actually regulation who made the products Congo-free and not conflict-free. And I myself met smugglers who can tell how they were stealing. Mineral was stolen still within Congo and then exported to or smuggled to other places where they could be sold as with other origin than DRC. And this is also a situation that was widely um, highlighted when the new EU legislation, that is the latest in this set of laws that has come alive, was decided. This law was decided last year, 2017, and it's estimated to come, or it's actually decided to come into action 2021. This law has taken care of one of the big drawbacks of the Dodd-Frank, as it's global. It will regulate trade with mineral from what is called conflict affected or high risk areas from a global perspective, and that is a very good thing. The drawbacks is, of course, that also this law has a number of loopholes that is not really motivated. I would see first, of course, that it's only on importers, and it doesn't really cover many companies. There is thresholds for doing due diligence that is ridiculously high, like for example gold, where the threshold is 100 kilo, and in my reality that would actually affect to like 5,000 Kalashnikov guns. So for 100 kilos of gold you can actually equip an army. So that would, of course, have to be relevant. There should have been a smaller. Uh, the threshold should be used in a totally different way. However, what we can see is that we have other development taking place at the same time. It's not only the legal side. It's actually so that we can see a major pressure from customers. I meet a number of uh, large companies who are selling direct to customers who says that this is coming more and more in public procurement. This also, of course, that companies want to do the right thing, but you have a combination of having a good due diligence procedure within the company, and you have a pressure from the customer side where the customer awareness is greatly growing. And here I would say, even though I've spent a lot of my time working with legal system, that actors like TCO Certified are crucial because they are both helping the customers to try to ask relevant questions when they do procurement, but they are um, also helping companies actually how you can meet their requirements from the customer sector. So this is a very relevant discussion that to try to actually go further than the law requires, although it's also very relevant to be aware about what the law says and try to follow it. Um, so I would hope that you have got some of the reasons why I would say it's important to try to combat the illegal trade with conflict minerals, but also why it's important to try to use the legal possibilities to buy this and trade with those minerals. Uh, and I would say that there is a number of reasons I would like to repeat. First, of course, as I said, I think that it's a good thing in itself to try to do right. It's nobody really um, are gaining from contributing to a world where we are actually having this kind of conflict and human rights violations. It's also so that the regulations, that the mechanisms that are developed today in these legislations for due diligence are actually what I can see also the same kind of tools that will come for other minerals like cobalt in the future. So it's also so that the routines that are connected to the legal systems and also to mechanisms like TCO Certified will actually cover more and more minerals in the future. So this is basically a homework that many companies will have to do sooner or later anyway for the future. And then in the end, we also have a growing demand from the customers. So it's actually a business case to trying to stay ahead in this development. So thanks a lot for listening and to follow me on this small trip to at least Africa. And I hope that you will find it interesting to continue to work with these issues. Thanks. And now I will hand over to Stephen Fuller, who will continue to speak about legislations and TCO certified systems.
Thank you, Joachim, for sharing your experiences and these disturbing realities and pictures from your visits to the mines. It's been very interesting. My name is Stephen Fuller, and I'm the Criteria Development and Compliance Manager at TCO Development. I'm the project manager for the implementation and development of the TCO Certified mandate on conflict minerals, which was first included to TCO Certified 3 years ago. Now, as we heard from Joachim's presentation, the situation for artisanal miners continues to be one of exploited poverty. That people are literally working themselves to death for these minerals that are such a key component in the smartphones we use. So what's being done? What tools are available to us, governments and industry, to help us drive improvement and avoid the problems with the extraction and trade of these minerals? So my presentation will touch on some of the key areas on what the largest economies are doing in response to the situation of conflict minerals, and how laws can work to force businesses to disclose where minerals come from, to make sure that they don't fuel armed conflicts and human rights abuses. I'll also cover how the private sector can complement and go beyond legislative demands through multi-stakeholder initiatives, and finishing with how TCO Certified works to support and drive the engagement in both actions in the present generation of TCO Certified. Starting with the US Dodd-Frank Act, Section 1502, this act has since 2010 been requiring US listed companies to carry out due diligence on minerals sourced from the Democratic Republic of Congo and neighboring countries, and publicly report findings annually. In 2011, United Nations members unanimously endorsed guiding principles. The state companies have the responsibility to make sure their activities don't contribute to harm and abuses. So the recommendation was that businesses implement a risk-based due diligence program as the effective way to meet this responsibility. So here now, by 2011, we already see that due diligence programs have become the key tool used by governments to avoid contributing or benefiting from human rights abuses and armed conflict. In 2011, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, which is an intergovernmental body of 35 developed countries, issued its guidance on responsible sourcing. So these are guidelines that were intended for companies operating in member countries. But today they are regarded as the standard international guidance for supply chain risk assessment for conflict minerals, even by governments and companies outside of the OECD membership countries. Of these, several African countries, including the DRC and Rwanda, have passed laws requiring companies to do risk check their supply chains. And in China, we see the conflict minerals standard has been closely aligned with the OECD due diligence guidelines, and where there are rules also that apply for implementing the standard. And the latest, of course, is in 2017, as Joachim said, that the EU ruled that from January 1st, 2021, EU importers of conflict minerals will need to carry out the due diligence on their supply chains of conflict minerals. So last year, I was at a conference in the US. Their 3 representatives from the largest economies were on a panel discussing their government's approach to conflict minerals. So what was interesting was that all 3 had a different approach to where they placed responsibility of that due diligence. So I'll briefly go through these differences in the next few slides. So front and center of the discussion on conflict mineral legislative responsibility is Dodd-Frank section 1502. Expert opinion here was that in order to eventually ensure that products contain only minerals that are conflict-free, the downstream companies, that's the part of the supply chain that comes after refining, needed to be held accountable for their actions. So 1502 requires publicly traded US businesses to publicly report on the origins of the conflict minerals. The fact that the supply chains are very complex and global means that even companies not traded in the US are also affected, since accountability and risk management is pushed upstream toward identifying the origins of the minerals. Today, the US companies have become leaders in applying supplier due diligence, and can also serve as a good example of how a company needs to identify and manage a supply chain. But presently, though, the future of Dodd-Frank 1502 feels a little unclear, but I just want to describe only the intention of 1502 and not get into the details about that, how that intention is being altered. It could be said that the EU is approaching conflict minerals in the same way as it does registration of chemicals into the EU. Not to focus on the content of the electronic products being imported, but rather on the importers of the materials over a certain weight level. This approach to focus on importers and not the product is a key difference between the EU legislation and Dodd-Frank 1502. Perhaps this different approach was due to the complexities the EU saw in an electronic supply chain. There are hundreds of suppliers stand between the final product and the smelters, creating a situation where it can take years to conduct a credible product due diligence. The EU has anyway opted for the approach that reduces significantly the number of subcontractors that need to be identified and audited in order to locate the smelters, which are at the front line of the responsible sourcing from the mines. Unfortunately, a criticism to the EU approach is that the impact will be on very few businesses, and it won't be until 2021, about 2.5 years from now, that the directive becomes mandatory on these few EU importers. But on the other hand, the development we consider to be a very good move, and also another area the EU decided not to follow the same line as Dodd-Frank, was to go beyond the DRC and demand a global due diligence. This will mean that, although, as we saw, the main area of concern remains the DRC, because there's so much written about it, the company must develop international risk procedures and processes that cover anywhere specific mining operations of free TG present a risk. It's unfortunate, though, that when the EU decided to go beyond DRC, that they didn't also go beyond free TG and include other risk minerals, or at least to include cobalt. China has advanced its efforts on conflict minerals through increased alignment to the OECD due diligence. You can see on the slide that the gold isn't included in the scope within China. As with the EU, the companies that will be impacted by China's regulations are the upstream ones. These upstream companies are those in the supply chain from the mining side to smelter and refiners, such as the mineral processors. Whilst the EU will focus on a small number of mineral importers only, China will focus not just on mineral importers, but also their exporters, the smelting and the refining in the country. So for those companies, there will be the need for supply chain surveillance, data collection, and analysis. I'll just explain that data collection is normally carried out using a conflict mineral reporting template, which is a long list of questions for the collection of the information through the manufacturer's supply chain. And this helps to identify the mineral's country of origin. So these templates cover conflict minerals, but I know that there are presently pilot templates under development that include cobalt. Looking back to when TCO Certified first introduced a mandate on conflict minerals in 2015, pre-research leading up to setting our minimum level of compliance showed us that whilst US-based brands were active in conflict minerals, there was a big gap for those IT brands based in Asia and Europe that didn't have conflict mineral reporting obligations. So naturally, setting up a due diligence process to collect and assess and validate data is an expensive investment of a company resources and can take many years to finalize. But the gap showed us that even other steps that existed outside the risk assessments, such as directly supporting in-region initiatives, was very low. The bottom line was that many Asian brands didn't even have a conflict mineral policy. So when setting up a mandate, we didn't just want to set a due diligence demand. We also wanted brands to see that membership in multi-stakeholder initiatives gives companies the opportunity to be a part of a collaborative effort of governments, industry, and civil society that look for areas for responsible investment and that will support local mining communities. Examples of the benefits in this are shown in the slide that you can see. But in short, their aim is to improve the standards at the mines. With growing participation, and in-region initiatives' influence can grow and become a key element in the responsible sourcing that helps smelters and refiners meet due diligence requirements. I can say that thanks to the present TCO Certified mandate, over 50% of the certifying brands joined a multi-stakeholder program because of this. Now, through these initiatives, the private sector goes beyond rules set by governments by complementing their progressive due diligence process work by sharing expertise and giving financial support towards in-region programs. Without such initiatives at work to improve the situation at the mines, manufacturers may decide to go the road of Congo-free instead of supporting work towards conflict-free. So as I said, our research showed us that when we launched the present generation of TCO Certified 3 years ago, many brands unaffected by Dodd-Frank 1502 had no policy mentioned on their website. Any auditor will tell you that a factory social inspection will always start at the company policies to measure the company level of commitment before the level of implementation is inspected. Now, a conflict mineral policy needs to be an essential statement by the brand that publicly underlines their commitment to conflict-free sourcing and their expectations on their supply chain. The OECD guideline can show you an example of the content of a credible mineral policy. So with our research, more evidence of companies getting off the hook came from those businesses that did actually have a conflict mineral policy, but lacked any policy implementation. So 3 years ago, we found little engagement for in-region and multi-stakeholder programs, and also a big gap in the level of due diligence implementation between Asian brands and the US-listed companies. In 2015, TCO Certified took the first step to even this playing field and close the gap by engaging all certifying brands as a collective effort toward ensuring their products were free of conflict minerals. So presently, the TCO Certified Mandate A73 requires the brand owner to complete a questionnaire and provide documented proof that is assessed by an approved third party. The questionnaire is made up of 3 sections that you can see in the slide. The first section requires there to be a public conflict mineral policy and evidence of how it's communicated to the suppliers. From here, proof of active engagement behind the words is also required, and this makes up sections 2 and 3. There, the brand has an option of supporting a multi-stakeholder program or proving a compliant level of due diligence that's in line with the OECD guidelines. A review includes how the brand identifies the risk suppliers, if they audit the findings, and are transparent with the results. This transparency would come down to a smelter list that they had on the website. Excuse me. So it was clear that under the assessment, several brand claims towards due diligence and OECD implementation were not founded, and the brand either made improvements to the due diligence process or as many did, they chose to become members in a multi-stakeholder program whilst progressing with their due diligence programs. So looking forward now to the release of the next generation of TCO Certified, that thanks to the information gathering from the questionnaire and the insight we gained working with brands and manufacturers, we consider industry is ready to go beyond conflict minerals by including at least cobalt, this essential material that to smartphones that is heading human rights concerns and other minerals that aren't free TG. So we also plan to remove the optional choice and demand that brands become involved in a multi-stakeholder program and prove a minimum level of compliance to the OECD due diligence guidelines. I'll close my presentation with this final slide on the Sustainable Development Goals. So there are 17 global goals set by the United Nations back in 2015. The broad goals are interrelated, though each has its own targets to achieve. As you see, the SDGs cover a broad range of social and economic development issues, for example, poverty, hunger, health, education, and climate change, and peace and justice, and so on. SDG 16 addresses peace and justice in our divided world, where some regions enjoy sustained levels of peace, security, and prosperity, and others fail to move out of the cycle of conflict and violence. So looking at Joachim's presentation of conflict and violence, we see an example of how divided our world actually is. But if we can drive corporations to behave in a responsible manner and show leadership by lessening their impact in these risk areas, then we, and not just the corporations, are working towards reaching this goal. So thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. Now it's time for some questions we have collected. So I will start with questions to Stephen. First of all, can you say more about the TCO certified objective with conflict minerals?
Yes, it certainly feels like a long road we're on until we're no longer confronted with these images shared by Joachim. So it's a situation that's fueled in part by the long wait for government and brand preventative actions, which we can feel more uncertain with what's happening with the future of Dodd-Frank. But we are making progress by engaging the Asian brands and having third-party assessments done on the due diligence process and giving recommendations back towards areas for improvement. So we're going to continue to engage the industry in areas where we consider our certification has the ability to set a level playing field and push industry beyond these laws, using the tools that are available at least to all of us, and continue to work in this collective way that we do with collective action.
Okay, next question. Is there a list of accepted in-region initiatives that can be shared?
Yeah, certainly. In the present version of TCO Certified under mandate A73, you'll find that there's a list of in-region initiatives we consider businesses should be in contact with and offering their support. So please visit our website to view this.
Thank you. Now I will move on to some questions to Joachim's presentation. First, the EU legislation is based on conflict countries. What is a conflict country according to the EU?
$1 million question in its true meaning. What has been said is that the European Union will present a list of what they call CAHARA countries. The abbreviation means conflict affected and high risk countries. This list has not been presented yet, and it's always a problem, of course, when such a list should be presented politically or should be produced politically, because then you can always suspect also that there might be other, if there is a country who's, for example, has a relation to the European Union that is definitely a conflict country, but if they would apply some pressure that they don't want to be in this list. However, business has already taken some measures by themselves. There is a number of tools that you can use to define what is a high-risk country. There is, for example, the what is called the Heidelberg Index. Those can be googled, and there you will find a number of parameters what is defining risk areas or conflict areas. There is also the Uppsala conflict database, is another tool that is quite popular within business. So basically, there are a number of you can measure from like a level of violence, for example, how many people that has been killed in an armed conflict. There might also be how well structures of society is functioning after a conflict. So basically, the EU will present a list. This list has not been published yet, and they're still working on it. But in this case, the politicians are a little bit behind the business actor and companies who is actually already taking action from these kind of general tools. So I would recommend you to put names like Heidelberg Index or Uppsala Conflict Database, where you can actually find definitions.
Okay, and then we got a specific question about text on a slide, I think. It said 80-90% in DRC is about number of people. It said 80-90% of mineral production. I guess it's number of people and not volume of production.
That's a very good question, actually. As this is also, I should say, even for the World Bank, really hard to measure, as the conflict mineral industry is by default very shy on. You would not find anybody who officially represent them or who is producing any kind of statistics. But it's right, when I spoke about the World Bank figure of people working in the business, it's the 80-90% are actually talking about people being employed, as you could have up to 2 million people employed in the artisan small scale mining, while less than 400,000 people are active in the industrial mining in DRC, and this number has actually substantially decreased because of the security situation. What I should say, though, however, is that it is not the volume of the artisan production is actually also stunningly high, although it's hard to measure, because it's also so that the industrial companies are in, and this is a positive development, that when the miners have cooperatives and they have the permission from the companies to dig in the concessions, the companies are normally buying the minerals to make it possible for them to be included in the what is called this green labeling and the bagging and tagging system. So yeah, that's sort of complicated answer, and yes, it's the number is about people employed, but I should also say it's a stunningly high part of the production that actually comes from this manual labor.
Thank you, Joachim. And let's finish this webinar with some closing remarks about facts and advice for purchasers looking for certified products. This is a slide showing TCO certified products in numbers. Our certification started 25 years ago. Of all displays sold for professional use in Europe and North America, more than 50% are TCO certified. In total today, 3,100 units are certified. All 4 leading PC notebook brands, Dell, Hewlett-Packard, Lenovo, and Fujitsu, use TCO certified. Actually, we checked it yesterday, 133 notebooks certified. 3 years ago, the number of notebooks was below 10, so there has been substantial growth. We repeatedly, of course, get the questions, how many smartphones do you have certified? We've just started that, and right now there are no certified smartphones, but we can see the interest growing. So we think we are on the route which started with notebooks 3 years ago. And you can find more information about certified products on our website. It's tcocertified.com/product-finder. Finally, what can a purchaser of IT products do today? We put together a guide which is called Guide for Sustainable IT Purchasing, which you can find on our website, and updated yesterday, so there's a fresh release. I'd like to highlight 3 things from it, which we found been very important. As a purchaser, you can raise internal awareness for sustainability issues and IT products in your organization. So it's not you who's driving this, but the entire organization. You can tell your suppliers about your sustainability criteria early and tell them often. Then they will notice that this is a key factor for you. And finally, which has been used historically and been successful, you can use contract conditions to encourage certification. If the products you prefer are not certified, you can give the vendor a grace period of, for example, 6 months to certify those products. So please check fresh guide to sustainable IT purchasing. That's all for today's webinar. If you have any further questions, please email them to us, and please look at our website. Thank you for attending this webinar, and bye for now.